came in. Yeah, there's a question that says, is this user dependent or does it apply to all users? If we just flip back to SAP, there are options here. So when you do your item placements, let's go back into the control properties. There are options in here to make these changes specific to select users. So on the applicable users, if you hit the ellipse here, it will give you a list of all the users, and you can define which users you want this change to apply to. If, let's say, it was something that you wanted to, you had 50 people working in your organization, and everybody was going to get it but 2 people, what you can do is select the exclude selected items checkbox here. And when you select that, what that does is it will apply it to everybody but the people that you select here. Now you can also select it to branches and departments if you've set this up in your system. Okay, a couple more questions here. What version is this available on? Yeah, I mean it's an 8.8 build, so it would be available on. I'm pretty sure, I would have to verify, but I'm pretty sure 8.8 build 1 would be fine. So you should be able to install APP as long as it's APP 88.1.2. something, which should run on any 8.8 build, then you should be okay to go. The next question is, so you make your item changes in a development environment. Is there an easy way to move this to production? Yeah, there is a tool, a migration wizard that's included as part of it. This is the one thing that's not on the right-click menu, but it is in here under Customizer. You could use this object migration wizard. The object migration wizard steps you through the process of moving the changes from one database to another. And do they survive future updates and upgrades? Yes, they absolutely do. To the extent that SAP doesn't change the coding on the user interface, which is something that they should never do. But just to be frank, they do. On occasion, it does happen. It's not on purpose, but they do sometimes make changes that affect the software development environment, which is essentially what you're using. It should not happen, but that's something that that on occasion, I've seen happen, and it's usually fixed with a patch release. Okay, so at this point, we're going to move on to the next section, which is how to add user-defined fields to the main form. Now, item placement is useful when you want to rearrange the standard SAP fields, but one of the most often requested customizations that I've heard over the years is why user-defined fields can't appear on the same form. Well, now they can. And using APP Customizer functionality, your user-defined fields and your standard SAP fields can both be placed on the same form right next to each other. Adding the UDFs to the main forms, it's a little bit different than moving the forms with the item placement. The process changes from, in the first case, we were picking the field where we wanted to move, and then we were moving it to, and then selecting where we wanted to move it. This is almost the opposite. So for user-defined fields, what we do is we first select where we want to move the field, and then underneath the APP Customizer menu, we select user-defined fields, and then we'll get a list of user-defined fields on that window, and we pick which one we want to move. And once we do that, the next window comes up, which you should recognize at this point, which is where do you want to put it. The nice part here is that it automatically fills the reference control in because that's where we started from. So all you need to do on this window is select which position you want to put that in relation to the field. Okay, and then once you do that, this is an example. We move this field here. It appears on the main form. Now, just one note about this. This field doesn't move. It actually is. It appears on the main form, and they're essentially the same field. So you've got the same field. It still sits on the user-defined field, but with enough effort, you can actually take this approach and move all of the key fields from your user-defined window on the side onto your main form, and then completely eliminate the need for users to have to look at this window anymore. So you can close this window up, and I know it causes problems. Sometimes people close this window instead of hitting the X to close the main window, and then the next time they open the form, it's not showing, and there's confusion about where those fields went. So it would be a really nice feature, and it is a really nice feature to be able to move these fields to the main form, moving them front and center so you can work with them. In addition, APP Customizer allows you to add new controls to the windows. So, for example, if you wanted to add a new tab, that's something that comes up with sales orders. With APP, this is easy. You just right-click on the existing tab set, and you can choose APP Customizer, New Item, and then just select Tab. And once you do that, you'll be prompted for the form controls. And on the form controls, you can change the caption because you don't want it to be called new tab. You can change it to be sales info or something like that, and apply the changes, and voila, you get your sales info tab. Okay, so in this next demo, we're going to add a new tab to the sales order window. We're going to move the tab to the left of the logistics tab. We'll use the item placement to move the sales employee field to the new tab. We're going to hide the reference fields, and we'll talk about that when we get there. Make final field position adjustments, and then we'll move the shipping by user-defined field to the new tab as well. Okay, so let's open up our sales order window and get started. Okay, so the first thing is to add a new tab. What we'll do is we'll just right-click on the existing tab set. So any one of these tabs will do. Select APP Customizer, New Item, and Tab. And you can see it creates the tab, but it has a caption of New Item, which we're not going to keep. So we'll change the caption here, and we're going to call this Sales Info. Okay, now we may want to move this field. So we can, if we right-click on it, and I could have done this before I closed it, if we reopen up the control properties and we select item placement options, it'll ask for a reference. So I'm actually going to select the logistics tab as my reference item. And then I'm going to place it to the left. Okay, actually, I think I shifted it over one too many. Okay, now on the Sales Info tab, what the new tab item does is it inserts something called a reference item. And the reason for this is that one of the most difficult parts of placing new fields onto this tab is that you need to select a field that's a reference field. And since it's a new tab, there's no reference items there. So the reference item is really just like a starter point that allows you to put new fields next to it. So since we want to take the sales employee field and move it onto this area, what we'll do is we'll right-click, go into APP Customizer and Control Properties, and select Item Placement Options. Now here, this is the point where the reference item comes into play. Since we want to put it next to here, we're going to select the reference item and then click this reference item here and place it below. Okay, so that's just a way to grab some position on this new tab and put something onto it. Once we've done that, we don't need the reference item anymore. So what we can do is we can right-click on it, go into the control properties of that reference item, and just set visible equal to not visible, right? So we're just going to make it disappear because we don't really need it. Next, we'll change the position of the field because it's a little bit too far to the right. So we'll go into the control properties for the label. I'm going to change my left position from 72 to 10. And instead of apply and close, I'm going to hit apply, which is going to show me the changes and leave the window open. So if I don't like that change, I can now change the value and reapply. That looks fine to me, so I'll hit apply and close to get rid of that. And then next, we'll adjust the position of the sales employee field. So I'll change this to try 170. Hit apply. Maybe a little bit closer. Go to 135. And that's good enough for me. So I'll hit apply and close. Okay, now last, we're going to open up the user-defined fields window. And I want to move the shipping by field, this user field, right beneath the sales employee. So again, we start on the target position, right? Where do we want to place it? So we right-click on the sales employee field, APP Customizer, and we look at the UDF option. And under here, we just find our ship by or shipping by field, and we select it. And when the item placement options come up, it already knows that we want to place it next to that field. So all we need to do is select below and click OK. And there it is. Okay, so here's an example of creating a new tab on your form, and then organizing both your SAP standard fields and your user-defined fields so that they exist side by side, front and center. You can close your user-defined window now because maybe that's the only field that you use. It's a user-defined field. And you've got complete access to the information. Okay, let's go back to up there. Okay, so quick review on this. What we covered in the SAP screen design, this is the conclusion of it, is how to place items. So we use the item placement function to move standard SAP fields from one position to another, and also make adjustments to the positions. We also added user-defined fields to the main form, and added new controls to the window, such as the tab. So I'm just going to take a quick look here at the questions and just see if we've got any new questions that came in. Doesn't look like we did, so we're going to move right ahead to the next section, which is SAP automation tasks with APP Customizer. Okay, we've covered a variety of ways that APP Customizer can help you change the look and feel of SAP Business One. In this next section, we're going to explore how you can modify the actual behavior of Business One with APP Customizer. Changing the application behavior can be useful in a number of scenarios. You may want to make the user experience more efficient. Maybe it's time-consuming for users to go from field to field and skip fields that aren't being used. You may want to validate the information that's being keyed in to make sure that the users are keying in the right data and critical data and not leaving blanks where they need to fill out information. Or you may want to add completely new features altogether. Maybe you've got a business process that you want to add in, and you can use the customizer tasks to create new functionality that didn't even exist before using the existing windows and some modifications. So there's a lot that you can do with automation tasks. The first thing is it's a very basic level, but it's useful. APP Customizer lets you define a custom tab order to match the order in which your company enters data. So if in your organization, when the sales order is entered, the person doing the order entry enters the customer code, and then they enter the delivery date, and then they enter the PO number or the customer reference number, and they don't really look at the contact person data or the posting date, which is already filled in. APP gives you the ability to, when they hit the tab key, define where the tab is going to go to, where the next field focus is going to go to. And it's a small change, but if you're processing a lot of orders and you're doing this every day, hundreds and hundreds of times, it could really add up to a more productive environment. And I think it makes the user experience a little bit better as well if you can customize it like that. So to set the custom tab order, there's underneath the APP Customizer menu, there's an option for tab order. And the way that this works is you select tab order, and then there's an option for set tab sequence. And once that's selected, APP is going to prompt you to click field by field through your form in the order that you want the user to tab through. And when you're done, it will require that you go back into here, into APP Customizer, back into tab order, and you'll see that this then changes to set tab sequence dash done. And that's the way that you stop the recording of the tab sequence. Okay. So similar, well, not similar, but another feature that's at the basic level is the ability to set mandatory fields. And this is something that I've also seen come up time and time again. One of the most requested features is that, if I've got people, maybe I bring in some temporary employees for my busy seasons, and they're going to be going into the system, and they're going to be keying in a lot of information. One of the big problems is that they don't key in all the information. They take shortcuts. They forget to ask questions of customers, and they don't fill in maybe an email address or a PO number or something like that. And there's really no way in SAP to prevent somebody from going in and partially filling out a sales order, let's say, and leaving out the PO number and adding it. So we can actually use APP to say, okay, these fields are going to be mandatory, and you have to fill them in, otherwise you can't continue. And the process for setting a mandatory field is very similar to the tab order. You go into the APP Customizer menu. Underneath the mandatory fields menu, there's an option for set mandatory fields. And again, you'll go through and you'll click one by one any fields that you want to create as mandatory fields. And when you're done, you'll return to the same menu, and you'll click it again to end the process. And that will save the mandatory fields. Okay, so this takes us to our fifth demonstration, where we will set the tab order and the sales order to go from the business partner code to the delivery date to the customer reference number. And then once we're done with that, we are going to set the customer reference number as a mandatory field, and then we'll take a look at the sales order window behavior after the change. Before we make the changes, let's just take a look at the standard behavior. So normally you're on the customer, and if you tab out of it, it'll, you look up your customer and you select it. It will then tab to the name field, okay? Which, if you think about it, if you just selected the customer, you're not going to be changing the name. The contact person, customer reference, then it goes to the currency, then it'll shoot over to the right side and tab through that side. So we want to change this. So what we do is we right-click on the sales order form, go to APP Customizer and Tab Order, and we select Set Tab Sequence. Okay, and these are instructions here. So if it says please click on the items, so you can read it in the order to specify the tab order. And this is important. So after you complete your selection, right-click on the form and go back into the same menu, except it'll say Set Tab Sequence dash Done. So we're now on our roll. So we want to click first in the customer field, then in the delivery date field, and then in the customer reference number field. Okay. And once that's completed, we right-click again, go back into the menu for tab order, and you can see that it's changed now, and it has the dash done at the end, and we just click that. And this is what it's actually created. It's created it's called a tab order settings configuration, and it's telling us that on this particular window, the sales order, this is now the order of the fields. And if you wanted to adjust this, you can click on it, and you can move them up or down, or you could remove fields if you accidentally clicked on them. But we're going to go ahead and just say OK and apply those changes. I'm going to reload the window. I'm not sure if it's necessary, but it doesn't hurt. So now, when we reload the sales order, we tab and select our customer, and tab again, you can see that it immediately takes us to the delivery date. We can put our delivery date in, and then once we tab out of the delivery date, it now takes us to the customer reference number. Okay, so the next change that we want to make is we want to make the customer reference number a mandatory field. It's a similar process. We right-click on the form, go into APP Customizer, mandatory fields this time, and set mandatory fields. Gives us the same or similar set of instructions, and we click OK. And now we're just going to click right there in that field. We're done. That's the only field we want. If we wanted more fields, we can select more fields. But in this case, we'll just select one. Go back in to mandatory fields, set mandatory fields done. Similar window shows us. Now, there's some options I want to show you here. And this relates to one of the questions that came up earlier. You can set mandatory fields by user, so you can say, okay, this is only going to be for specific users are going to have to key this information in. So that might be a helpful thing. You can also decide whether you want to check that field only during the add process but not during update, or only during the update process but not during add, or during both, however you'd like. You can select what color if you want to highlight that field so that people know that it's mandatory. There's different colors, so if we did a, I'll leave it like Corel. I think the yellows are a little bit better, but it may get confusing with the fine functionality. So we'll leave it the way that it's set right now. So you can pick what highlight color you want. And then also at the bottom you'll see there's an option for warning only. So if you wanted to not require that somebody entered a PO number or a reference number, but you just wanted to make sure that they knew that they didn't enter it, so just pop up a warning but still let them save it, you can check the warning only option. But we're going to leave that as it is because we actually want to stop the order from going in altogether. And we'll click OK. Again, we'll reload this. Okay, so this is that's the color that was selected as the default. So that's our visual cue that that's a required field. So if we go and we select our customer, tab over to the delivery date, enter a date, and then skip the customer reference number, come down here and put the order in for an item and try to add it, okay, there's a message at the bottom that says customer reference number is a mandatory field. It will not, you can click it a million times, it's not going to let you add that until you actually put a value in there. Okay. All right. So that's actually that's a conclusion of those two topics. Let me just take a look at the questions real quick. Can you set the tab sequence on the line items of the order? That's from Jeff. You know what? I do not. I haven't done that. So I would want to test it. I'm not going to do that right now, but that's definitely something that is worth testing and finding out. And if by chance it's not an available feature, Jeff, that's something that you know, this is a product that continues to be in evolution, and there's new functionality being added. So if it's not there, I'm definitely going to get that on their list to add in future releases. Okay, so the next topic we're going to take a look at is adding buttons to forms. So setting tab sequences and mandatory fields, they're practical, but they're just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more that you can do with Customizer. In the previous section, we added the tab to the sales order window, so it's very similar to that, because in this section, we're going to add a button to the business partner form, and you'll see it's almost the identical process. So to do that, we will open up the business partner window. We're going to right-click on the form, going to go to APP Customizer, select New Item. And this time, instead of tab, we'll select button. Okay, and if we want to place it next to a field, the best way to do this is instead of right-clicking on the form at the beginning, right-click on where you want to place it. So if I want to place my button to the right of the cancel button, I just right-click on the cancel button. And when I get to the new item button selection and the item placement options come up, it'll automatically fill in the reference control. If I didn't do that, if I clicked on the form, I could just hit the ellipse and I could select the cancel button. It doesn't matter, but it's just a shortcut. And then once this comes up, you just say where you want to put the button. So we'll put it to the right of the cancel button. And then you get your item properties, and it's here that you can change the caption. And once you do that, the button is added to the form like you see here. All right, so adding a button to a form is, it's easy, but it actually doesn't do anything. It's just you can click on it; it won't actually do anything. It's just going to be a button. So, in order to get some more functionality out of this and to understand what we can do with this button, we need to talk a little bit about the terminology of events and procedures. All right, now earlier we talked about properties, and we all know that properties define or describe the visual things that we see on the screen. Events are actions that occur in Business One. And they're actions that can occur either by a user doing them or just as a result of something else that caused them to happen. But an event would be a good example of an event is someone clicks on the button that we just created. That would be an event. It would be a button press of that, or a press of that button. Or the load of a window. When you open up a window, if you wanted something to happen, that would be an event that you can look for. And then procedures are the actions that we want to happen. That's like when we listen for the event, we wait for the event, so that when the event happens, then we can trigger our procedure and we can run our procedure. So to kind of put this in context, the event that we're going to be looking for in this example is the user's going to click our button. And once the user clicks the button, the procedure that we're going to do is we want a message box to appear. We want to pop up a message and tell the user something. So let's take a look at how this is done. The first thing we need to do is we need to go into the properties of the control that we created. So that productivity button that we created earlier, we want to go into the properties of that. So we just right-click on it, go to APP Customizer, and open up the control properties. And once we open up that window, previously we looked at the properties of the item, but there's also, this is actually, if you look at the title, I kind of glossed through this earlier, it's Item Properties and Events. There's also an Events tab on here. So when you click the Events tab, you'll see all of the events that are associated with the button that we created. For any event that we decide, we can define a procedure by clicking on the Define button that's next to that event. In our example, we're going to create a procedure on the Item Pressed event. Okay, so that's going to be our procedure. That's going to pop up a message that tells the user something. Once we go to define, we end up on this window, which is called the Event Handler. And this is actually this is more advanced functionality. We're going to plow right through this window right now and come back and talk about it a little bit later. But what we're going to do is we're going to go right to the No Validation section, and we're going to define a new procedure right here. And at that point, this lets us set an alert, which is going to be either a pop-up message box or a status bar. So we'll do a message box, and we'll tell people that APP Customizer is powerful. Now, you can also do a status bar at this point, and we'll talk about that. There's some options there as well. Okay, so we're up to demonstration number 6. So the goal here in this demonstration is we're going to we'll add that button to the business partner window, and then we'll create a procedure that displays a message when the button is pressed. Now, one thing I'm going to do is as I click, I'm noticing at the bottom I've got my item properties showing. To turn that off, we'll just right-click APP Customizer and hide field properties. That'll turn that off so that doesn't keep popping up at the bottom. All right, so we want to add our button next to the Cancel button. So we just right-click on Cancel, go to APP Customizer, New Item, and select Button. Says, okay, reference control is 2, which is the Cancel button. Where do you want to place it in reference to that? We place it to the right. Click OK. and that'll bring up the, it'll put the item on there, and it'll bring up the properties. A couple of things that I see about this. It looks to be a little bit less in height. So I'm going to add a couple to this. I'm going to make this 21. I'm going to change the caption. And I'm going to, I'll change the width because this may not be as wide as I need for that word productivity. So I'll change the width and I'll just make it 75. I hit apply just to see what it looks like. It's actually a little bit too big. Yeah, it looks like 20 is the magic number. Okay. So once I'm happy with the way the button looks, I apply and close. Okay, and there's the button. So that's the first step is getting the button on there. Now what we want to do is we want to capture the event when somebody presses this button. We don't want it to just do that. We want it to actually pop up a message and tell them something. So we'll right-click on it again, go into the control properties. And we could have done this right away. There was no need to close the window and reopen it. I'm just trying to keep everything separate. So once we've got the properties open for the button, we can click on the Events tab. And again, here are all the events associated with that button. And we're going to use the item pressed event. So go ahead and hit define. Got a question has come in. Is APP better than B1UP, which is another product that's out there that does allow you to make screen changes. They're different products. They work very differently, even though they accomplish many of the same things. There are some differences. One of the things that I like better about APP Customizer is it lets you work on right in the form or right on the control that you're working on. B1UP requires that you go out into separate menus. Almost everything is off of the main menu, and you go in there and you set up functions and things on that side, and you have to do some research in your forms to find out what to reference. So I find it a lot faster and easier to create some of this automation in APP just because you just right-click on things and you can do the work right on the form. But yeah, I mean I'm sure there's pros and cons of both products. Okay, so sorry, getting back to this. So we've got now we're creating a procedure on the item pressed event, and we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna skip through the event handler for now and go ahead and just define new to create a new procedure. And we'll select alerts. We're gonna give it a name. So this will be we'll just call it the item pressed event. You can call it anything. It doesn't. It's just for reference, so you know what it is. And then we'll select message box and say APP Customizer is powerful. Okay, so that's it. Now, if we wanted to do a status bar, we can select status bar. And the status bar, just if anyone's not aware of the difference, the status bar is what shows up at the bottom on this part of the bottom of the screen here. Most people prefer the message box because I think one, we're used to it. I think that in most programs that you use that are Windows-based, when you get a message, you get it's a box that pops up in your face and tells you that. And I think the other reason is that it pops up in your face. There's really no way to ignore it when it does happen. The status bar messages at the bottom, sometimes people don't see them, or maybe they choose to ignore them. Whatever the reason, they're not as prevalent, or they're not as obvious as the pop-up messages that the message boxes do. But if you do decide to go with the status bar, you can select whether the status bar is a success, a warning, or an error. And really all this means is what color should it be. So success status bar messages come up as green. Warnings come up, success come up as green. Warnings come up as blue, and errors come up as red. So those are the three options there. And then you can choose different durations of how long that message should remain at the bottom. But we're going to do a message box. And click OK. we're going to apply and close on this window and apply and close for the event. And now when we click our productivity box, voila, there's the message box. So that's a, it's very quick to set something up like that. And it's a good, this is like a good fundamental skill because it's actually, I don't know that you would ever create a button that pops up a message, but I think you'll do both of those things in more complex projects. I've got a response back from Teresa. Hi, Teresa. And her comments are, I've used B1UP, and this appears much easier. I agree. I've used both products as well, and I find this much easier to create some of the functionality. There's also a lot less, as we get into the more advanced topics of like creating macros and things of that nature, I think there's going to be a much wider gap between how much easier, this is going to be so much easier to use than B1UP is when we get to that point. Okay, and right on point, our next topic is building macros. So let's talk about this as a new term possibly for people. A macro, as defined by some dictionary out there on the internet, is a single computer instruction that initiates a set of instructions to perform a specific task. So it's basically give me a couple of instructions, wrap them all together and package them, and then when I run something, let it run all of those things at once. Now, I first became familiar with the term macros using spreadsheet programs like Microsoft Excel or Lotus 1-2-3, for those who remember that. And they became a very powerful component of spreadsheets. Macros were very powerful because they allow tasks to be completed faster, but not only faster, more consistently. If you put a macro in a spreadsheet and you give that spreadsheet to somebody, they can click the button and the same things would happen each time. Or if you were using your own spreadsheet and you found yourself doing the same tasks over and over again, sometimes a macro is a helpful way to help you do it the same each time and not forget a step. The problem with macros when they first came out was that only the very tech-savvy users could figure out how to write them. And that was a problem. And so someone came up with the brilliant idea of a macro recorder that allowed anyone to record steps, and it would save the steps as a macro. And that added a lot. What was so brilliant about the macro recorder was not only did it allow anyone to create a macro, but it also doubled as a learning tool, so that those who were interested could record macros and then view the resulting macro to see how they were written, so that they could learn. It's almost like a self-teaching tool to learn how to write macros yourself. And you could just say, okay, I want it to do A, B, and C, and then you look at the macro that was recorded and you say, okay, that's how they did it. So then when you want to do D and E, you could actually write it yourself without recording it. So APP is actually bringing that revolutionary concept to Business One, and that's I'm excited to show you this. So in our next example, we're going to create a macro that's going to change what we just did, and instead of the user clicking the button and the message box appearing, what we're going to want to do is we're going to have the user click a button, and we're going to create a sales order for that business partner record that we're on. Okay, so the only difference here is that last step. When we got to that last step, previously we went to the alerts tab and we put in a pop-up. We put message box and we put a message. There's also a tab on there for macro. So we're going to go to the macro tab, and then we're going to hit the record button. And we're going to record the process. And once we record it, we'll go back and we'll take a look at the macro code. And then finally, we'll add an event handler to make sure that we only create the sales order if the business partner is a customer. Because if we're on a vendor record and we hit the button and it tries to create a sales order for that vendor, it's going to fail. So we'll take a look at how to handle that as well. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is let's go back into the properties of our productivity button. Okay, when the properties appear, instead of looking at the properties again, we're looking at events. Okay, and then here's our item pressed event that we created. So we want to edit this. We don't want it to do our message box anymore. Again, the event handler is we're ignoring that. So we're going to go right and hit the ellipse button to go right into the event, the procedure we created. And here's where we make our change. So first we'll get rid of the message box. And that's all we need to do for that. And we're going to go over to the macro. And on the macro, what we'll do is we're going to hit the record button. And as soon as we do that, two things happen. One, you can see that the macro recording is in process. But the second thing is, and I'm hoping you can see it on your screen, I'm not sure, there's a red outline around the entire screen that is a visual indication that we're recording. And that's important because to start recording, we have to get back into the application and do some work, and then the other window disappears. So this is just kind of reminding us that we're still in recording mode. And what we're going to want to do is first we need to grab the customer code from here. So we right-click on it and go into the APP Customizer menu, and we select Copy Item. Now this is important because this is probably an easy mistake to make, but I think once you get used to using the recorder, you'll remember this. You don't want to use the standard copy option right here. You actually need to go into APP Customizer and use that copy because it needs to register it. It needs to know exactly what it's copying, and this is the way to do it. So once you copy it, next we want to open up the sales order window. And what I like to do is go into the modules option at the top and then drill down to sales order. The reason why is, and I'll show you this. I'm going to view system information. When we go in here and we go down to module sales order, if you look at the bottom of the screen, I can't point at it, but at the bottom left of the screen it says menu ID equals 2050. That's an important thing to remember, and you'll see later when we look at the macro, you'll see why, where that comes into play. So anyway, I'm going to open up the sales order window here. And on the sales order window, I want to paste in the customer code that I copied. So I right-click, go to APP Customizer, and select Paste Item. Now you can actually copy, using that copy function, you can copy multiple values from the previous screen, and it will save them all as different menu items, and then you can choose which ones to paste where. But in this one, we just did one, so it's got the card code, and we paste it. Okay, and then we'll tab out, and then what I'll do is I'm going to click in the, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to click in the item number field just to set the focus there, just to show you what it does. And when I'm done, I go back into the APP menu at the bottom, and I select Stop. And that's it. That's all there is to the recording. So what we can do now is let's look at the macro editor. I'm going to load the macro editor, and let's see what it did. Now this is where the value of recording comes into place, because if you needed to go in and write all of this code, you'd be lost because you'd have to learn all these different functions and values that need to get filled in. But being able to record it, all of a sudden the mystery of it's taken out. You can start looking at it and breaking it down and understanding what everything is. So this is when we right-clicked on the form to copy the business partner code, and this got the field value from Form 134, item user ID 5, and if I point to that and I look at the bottom of the screen, again, I can't use my cursor, but just look at the bottom left, you'll see at the bottom that the form is 134 and the item equals 5. Okay, so those are where those numbers are coming from. SAP gives you, with the system information option, SAP will expose those values to you so that if you wanted to write this, you could actually just write it from information without recording it. And then what APP is doing is it's storing that value in something called variable 1. And if you did another value, it would create variable 2, variable 3, etc. Then what it does is it does menu click 15874, and that's when I clicked on the modules menu. And then menu click 2050. That was when I clicked on the sales order from underneath modules. So that's going to open up the sales order. And then finally, the last, these 3 steps here, right-click 139 and set field value. This takes the variable 1, which was the business partner code, and it places it into field 4 on Form 139, which is the card code on the sales order. And the last thing at the bottom here is I clicked on the